I suppose if you want a soundbite, it's, scaling efficiency without scaling indifference.
The worst place to be anywhere in the world is in the middle.
Sometimes I feel like people can quite easily just hide behind process as well, and it can be used as an excuse.
What surprised me was I become so used to the indifference.
It becomes a Jet2 fan for life because something happens. It's a really human moment. But that human moment not only created a memory for him, but it created a story for our family to always go back and reminisce on.
It gives me a sense of safety. In fact, that's probably more important to me than having a good connection with somebody. I just want to get to my destination safely.
When you believe that you're working towards something that is bigger than yourself, bigger than the organization, bigger than who you are, and that implies to you that you're working for something that is much bigger, more beautiful, more important than your role on earth.
Being a steward means and the responsibility I have to ensure that every customer coming in through the door, making sure that we help deliver the best possible experience.
If you've ever been friend zoned by a girl, it's almost like the friend zone type organization. You're reliable, you're dependable, you're a nice guy.
You're open to delight, you're open to surprise, you're open to joy, right? And that's the thing that so many of these Tin Man organizations miss.
It's making sure your people then use that information to deliver that experience.
You should use technology and AI to do the work that humans resent. We've chosen to be 1% better at 100 things than 100% better at one thing.
We're seeing a lot of companies, certainly companies that I'm interacting with, they're trying to get their people to come back in the office, and that indicates a lack of trust.
The company spent less money on service recovery, service was better, operations was better. All-round improvement by removing the rules, right?
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2, season 2 of the Breaking the Blueprint podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. It's all about the things that we do to drive customers to come back to us time and time again through delivering great experiences and those memorable moments that drive loyalty, advocacy, and trust. I'm back with my trusted partner and co-host Iqbal. Hello Iqbal, how are you doing? How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Vinay. Pleasure to be here. Of course, again, it feels like it's been a while since we've did this because of the Christmas period and things like that. But
which is a lovely segue into our guest who's patiently waiting for us to finish our preamble. Vimal Raj, thank you for joining us. Vimal and I met on LinkedIn a couple of years ago now, I think, and we started commenting on each other's posts, and we found that we shared some similar views, but we also challenged each other with the way that we looked at things. And we got to know each other quite well. And in fact, when I was in Dubai last year, we actually met up in person for a coffee. So it was nice to go from online friends to in-person friends, which was really nice. And he's got a fascinating background, worked in aviation, and has worked with some great brands and organizations. But I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him introduce himself. Vimal, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us all the way from Dubai.
Thank you very much, Vinay, and thanks, Iqbal. Really pleased to be on your podcast. It's really an honor. I'm from Singapore. I've grown up all over the world, actually. Over the last 25 years, I've lived across 8 countries. So I bring a very different perspective to things. I bring a multicultural sort of a different way of looking at things. Ever since I was a little kid, I've been the boy who looks at people, look at people. Yeah. So I don't know if you know what that means, but when something happens, everybody turns and looks. Of course, I'm normal, I look too, but then I very quickly look at the people looking at what's happening, because for me, that drives my understanding of how do we behave, what are we looking at, what are we thinking, what are we feeling, what are we saying? Why do people make the decisions that they do? And that's personally, that's the kind of person I am. In terms of work, I guess, you could call me a facilitator, a consultant. I have a portfolio career. It doesn't really matter what you call me, right? I don't think there is a single box that can sort of fit everything that I do. But I do a bit of consulting, I do a bit of training, I do a bit of educating in the university. My world is essentially all about, customer experience, leadership, operations, and so on. I work at the intersection of those three things because I believe that if you truly want to deliver an outcome, an experience that is memorable, that is delightful, that people truly care about, then it begins at the top, right, with leadership, and then it flows all the way down into how you're actually doing what you need to do. I suppose if for the traditional folks who need a sort of a definition as to what I do, I really help to deliver world-class operational performance without losing the humanity that typically comes along with what high-volume, high-transaction businesses engage in. So I help you build world-class operational loyalty, long-term value, not just for your customers, but also for your employees and for your business. I really learned to do this from my very first employer, which I think is no bias, but the best airline in the world, Singapore Airlines. And I've stayed deeply embedded within the travel and aviation ecosystem ever since. And today, my clients work with me because I don't offer. I mean, there's theory, there's frameworks, and all of that, but I move far beyond the theory and the frameworks, and I help translate those ideas into everyday behavior that leaders, managers, and frontline people need to engage in, right? And so that's sort of what I do and how I do things. I suppose if you want a soundbite, it's scaling efficiency without scaling indifference. So I was sort of listening. Yeah, I was listening to your stories when you guys were introducing yourselves, and I think indifference is really something that happens when you particularly in high volume environments, right? So I help to overcome that indifference, and I try to help you scale the humanity.
That's really nice. And just a couple of things in what you said. I think it's interesting that the more and more leaders that I speak to in the customer outcome space, I won't say CX, but people that tend to lead that, one of the common traits that I find is they're normally, the good ones anyway, normally have a sense of curiosity. So your example of not just watching what happens, but watching the people, watching what happens. I think the job really is to look beyond the surface and observe what other people aren't looking at, and to find those things that aren't that obvious and bring them to the surface. And I think that's a kind of skill and a way and a way that you look at the world, the map of the world that you have, and your way to navigate that is quite interesting. So I think that's really that's a really common trait that I find across really great leaders, that they have that within them. And scaling without losing that scaling, but not scaling with indifference is also something that really resonates with me. And you heard it in our stories. And one of the things I often talk about is the worst place to be anywhere in the world is in the middle. If you think about the classic NPS scale, you've got your promoters and your detractors. For whatever we think about NPS, and just using it to articulate the point. But the vast majority of those people in the middle, it's indifference. They'll come once. It's not bad enough they're going to complain, and it's not good enough that they're going to come back. They just next time they're in the market for the product, they're straight onto a search, and they'll go and find somebody else rather than you being their default. And I think that's the bit that we try to capture and measure. But before we move into the questions, it would only be, Iqbal and I have shared an example of experience over process and tech. And before we jump in, I just wondered if you had something that's happened with you recently that also kind of illustrates that point.
Yeah, I mean, I've got loads of examples. I mean, for me, every interaction I engage in with a business or with service personnel becomes fodder for my posts or for my thinking, right? So I've actually got two. Maybe I'll stick to a travel example, and then I'll move on to something with my daughter. So, I travel a lot for work, and there's this one hotel that I've stayed in 5 times in the last, I'd say probably 3 months or so. And what surprised me was I become so used to the indifference. You go, you reach, you rock up to the reception counter, you're checked in, you're given your key card, and then there you go. On the third occasion that I was there, so I've been there twice. On the third occasion that I was there, the lady at the counter actually said, "Oh, Mr. Rai." First time she's used my name. "Mr. Rai, welcome back. Thank you for your loyalty to us." And mind you, I'm obviously not at the base tier. I'm sort of like 3 levels up, right? Two below the top. And I was actually on my phone, and I stopped and I looked at her and I'm like, "Oh, thank you very much." And she said, "Yeah, you were here 2 weeks ago, and how was your stay then?" And she was talking to me while she was clickety clacking And then she said, for your loyalty, I'm going to put you in a nicer room, one that faces the mountains instead of the city. And I said, oh, that's really nice of you. She says, yeah, I hope you enjoy your stay because this time you're staying longer. I mean, something so simple, right? But what it brought home to me was the fact that, the other 2 times and the following 2 times, nobody said anything like that to me. Obviously, she wasn't there. So it's this idea that you have a system that is giving you the information that I was just here 2 weeks ago. You have my loyalty status. You have all of that, but you're not making use of it in any meaningful way to create that connection, right? You're just looking at it. It's just information on a screen and you're just doing the work that you're doing, which is checking me in.
Yeah. Right? No, that's a great example. Yeah. And I don't know if Iqbal wants to jump in here, but I mean, it leads beautifully to kind of the main part of the conversation I was going to jump in. Iqbal, did you want to, you look like you had something to jump in with.
No, I think it's, I always find this really interesting. I think a lot of this is, as you said, the information, like in that particular example, Vimal, clearly everybody's got access to information whereby they can have that interaction, that connection with you. But sometimes I think it's the type of people that you hire to deliver that service. Some people are very confident and they feel quite comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we used to do in Singapore Airlines, and then I brought into the other airlines that I work with and I consulted with, it's a very simple thing. Most of us don't fly. We try to avoid flying on our birthdays or on national holidays, right? Because it's a holiday and you want to spend it with your family. But on the odd occasion that you have to do it, imagine the joy that you can bring as an employee when you recognize somebody somebody who's flying on his or her birthday and you actually wish them. You don't have to do anything grand. You don't have to give them a card or a cake or anything, but just, happy birthday, Mr. Rai. I noticed today is your birthday. You have that information on the screen. You're taking his passport. You're looking at it. You know the date, but you're just not using it to create that connection.
And it's interesting because we talk a lot about having systems and information in order to be able to do that. But even without them, the clues are always there. There's always something going on that enables you to, if you're observing, to take your example, curiosity. We talked about curiosity earlier on. If you're a person who naturally has that sense of curiosity and observational skills, you can pick out moments like the story I was going to share. So people that have seen me speak at conferences will know one of my key stories is I share a story about my nephew. At 8 years old, we're in Barcelona and he becomes a Jet2 fan for life because something happens. It's a really human moment. And I won't tell you the full story here, but there was something going on. He was messing about. The Jet2 staff were observing what was going on, observing me and him having interaction. And then I threatened to put him in the luggage hold because if he didn't stop messing about, that's what I was going to do. And the Jet2 member of staff that was there, who had obviously been watching this thing unfold for a period, something in her told her this was a good time for me to also jump in and contribute. So she jumped in, and when he was saying to me, "Oh, you can't do that," she went, "Oh, yes, you can." And then this whole thing happened where we went along with this joke where we were going to put him in the luggage hold. But he talks about Jet2 not because of the plane and the price and all of that. He's got no idea what the price. But that human moment not only created a memory for him, but it created a story for our family to always go back and reminisce on. And I've flown with them 11 times now, probably 12 now if I count correctly. And every single time, the interesting thing is that this isn't a one-off. So, you were talking about it's the people you employ. Lots of organizations have heroes in their organization that can deliver those one-off moments, but to do it repeatedly takes a certain type of structure. And what Jet2 do brilliantly is every time they get the boring basics of operational excellence right, but it gives their people a platform then to be able to put these human moments. And every time we've flown with them, each time there's been something that's happened that's been a memorable human moment, even not directly with us, but I've just observed them doing things with other people where I think, oh, that was a really nice touch, or that was a great way. You just see it in their people. So I just think it's a fascinating thing. And just sticking on the earth, one of my favorite books that I read, this is published in the 80s. It tells you how old it is. It's a book called Moments of Truth by Jan Carlson. And Jan ended up being the CEO of SAS Airlines. And in his book, he talks about the whole transformation of how he make it more customer centric. But he talked about what he observed when he first went in. And often in aviation, and I'm sure Vimal will talk to it, and in public transport, where I've spent a lot of my time, we can often focus on the chunks of metal, the infrastructure, the engineering side, the process of what we do, and not pay as much attention to the other side of the coin. And so, Vimal, my question to you is, I mean, we were talking about this book, and we looked at some of the concepts in there. I mean, it was almost ahead of its time, right? In many ways. So when you hear about these kind of stories that we've described about warmth in organizations, whether it's Lego, whether it's Jet2, whether it's, the hotel that you stayed at, what's usually happening inside that organization that enables that to come through for people?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vinay, because I think there's a lot of sound bites that we hear. There's a lot of PR. There's a lot of statements that leaders make. But at the end of the day, it's the culture that matters. It's the culture that drives your thinking and then drives your behavior. And right off the bat, I would say the first couple of things, probably the very first thing that enables any employee to do, to do something as special as what the Jet2 employee did with you, or what happened in SAS with Jan Carlsen's leadership, is psychological safety. Your staff need to know that they're not going to be penalized for making a mistake, or that they're not going to be, held back for trying to do something extra, or that they're just allowed to think, that they're allowed to be creative, they're allowed to express themselves, right? So psychological safety is a huge component of any great service environment. And then I think the second thing, which is something that you're not really going to hear a lot about, because it's a bit, some people think of it as woo-woo, which is a technical term for, well, you know what I'm trying to say, is this idea that, we all have to have a higher sense of purpose. And it's very difficult for me to explain it, but when you believe that you're working towards something that is bigger than yourself, bigger than the organization, bigger than who you are, and that implies to you that you're working for something that is much bigger, more beautiful, more important than your role on earth. I think when you have that higher sense of purpose, that really kind of drives you. It really stretches you. It's a secret that I employ in my workshops, actually, that, so the one line that I put in my workshops is, what I'm going to talk to you about in the next couple of days is not work. It's, there's going to be lots of theory and frameworks and ideas and examples and so on. But really, all of these things are going to help you in life, as parents, as husbands, as friends, as co-workers. And that just gets everybody to sit up, because all of a sudden, it's not about work. It's not about operations. It's not about my brand. It's not about my company. It's about life, right? And I'm going to become much, much more valuable in my life to the people that I love. And suddenly that higher sense of purpose just enables you to just think differently, to be creative and so on. So I think these two things are really at a core. I mean, there's lots of other things like, being part of a team and being appreciated and being recognized. I mean, all of those things you read about in all leadership books. But I think that the two biggest things, psychological safety and a higher sense of purpose.
I think it's really interesting. There's a model that I use called the 6 human needs. There are 6 universal human needs that we all have. There are 4 that are core, and then there are 2 that are more kind of, I would say, more needs of the spirit's purpose, if you like to use an example. So I think you've got certainty, variety, significance, and love and connection. And I think that's the role of the organization. They give you certainty about knowing what you're doing. You've got repeatable stuff that happens. You feel safe, but you've also got opportunity and variety in the work that you do. Significance comes from being recognized and being made to feel like you matter and that you're valued. And then love and connection comes from your colleagues and the support network that you have. And if you've got those 4 things, you're in a pretty good place. And then when you have that baseline, you're able to then think about, what's my contribution? What's my opportunity to growth? Those are the needs that then come into the mix. And I think that's university as human beings, we all have that. I mean, I've been lucky enough to have worked in a culture, when I worked in my early banking days, when I worked with a brand that launched in the UK, that absolutely had that in Oodles. And I think when you're exposed to that and you've been in that kind of culture, it wires you a certain way that you can see that. And you often then, it's similar to the work that you do, Vimal, when I go into organizations, when you see the opposite, where people don't have that and how that's holding them back. It's quite I guess a challenge to kind of grow them back out of it and inspire them to do that. So I think.
Well, I tell you what it is. When you see that, you realize it's not the people in the room with you. No. It's not that. It's the systems around them. It's the leadership that's guiding them. It's all of those things, right? And then sometimes you know, funny enough, you stand there and you say, well, these are not the folks I need to be talking to. I need to be talking to all the folks that are not attending this, because they're the ones that have put the systems and the culture in place for these guys.
I think one of the key things, what I find, like you said, is it's because people do genuinely, it is just work for them at the end of the day. And a lot of them will blame red tape or, all the restrictions and the limitations that apply to all of this. And sometimes people can hide behind that too. And I think it's easy to, right? It's like, well, it is an effort to actually do the things that, we talk about when it comes to building those human connections. And sometimes I feel like people can quite easily just hide behind process as well. And it can be used as an excuse. So I love that concept, Vimal, around having a higher purpose and actually tapping into how people can be more human-like with others when they interact with them. And that could be, as you say, helping you build better relationships with your family members, your friends, but actually just the customers that you're interacting with. And having that kind of consistency, I think, makes a massive difference. And I think one of the things that we obviously will be kind of leaning into is, particularly in aviation, and it's something, Vimal, you've spoken quite a lot about, is that building out a tin man organization. Now, it's interesting, you're talking about all of these human interactions, but how do you build that in a tin man organization? I find that quite interesting and intriguing. I know we're going to move on to other concepts like Octopus as well. And I've got some thoughts around how you could potentially combine the two, but would love to get your kind of view on what that is in plain English.
Yeah, sure. So, we moved pretty fast from what Jan Carlson was talking about and what he did with SAS, but essentially the Tin Man organization in plain English is what Carlson, about 40 years ago now, right? If you think about it, because he wrote the book in 87 or 85. It's what he warned us against, right? So a Tin Man organization is at its core an efficient, well-run organization that is consistent, it's compliant, it has SOPs, it has well-trained people. It's very organized, right? And where it follows processes, it follows rules, it follows systems, there's a hierarchy. And a lot of this is actually very useful, right? Particularly, if you look at hotels, you look at highly regulated businesses in government, for example, in traffic, trains, aviation, safety and security are non-negotiables. Risk is actually asymmetric in the sense that if something were to go wrong, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people are impacted. So it's very, very important to adhere to the guidelines and to the deadlines and to the rules and the limits, right? There's regulations. There's a very clear need for compliance, not creativity. So that's essentially what a Tin Man organization is. It's not bad per se. It's very good, particularly for relevant situations. And I would say that these are the things that make an organization function very, very efficiently, often very effectively, quite predictably, which is all the great things that that the left side of the brain wants, right?
Sorry, go.
Right, no, I was thinking as you were saying that this might be a strange analogy, but they're almost like if you've ever been friend zoned by a girl, it's almost like the friend zoned type of organization. You're reliable, you're dependable, you're a nice guy, you're a nice person who sticks to the rules, who does things the way they're supposed to do it, and you're that person that gets the phone call when they need a bit of help because you are reliable. But stereotypically, there's the bad boy or the person who has that little bit of character or something a bit different that seems to get the attraction. but you're just there in the background as Mr. Dependable. I'm probably revealing too much about my youth here.
Your history. Your relationship history.
I did not think, I never thought this was where this conversation was going to go. but you're right. I think it's brilliant that you brought that up, because I think it speaks to something that is inherent in all of us, that we seek the special, we seek the delight, we seek that little element of character or differentiation in a business, right? I mean, whether it's in a person or in a character or something. And I think Tin Man organizations are, as you said, the dependable, sure organization that works, right? Unfortunately, we are in a world today where almost nothing, and I mean particularly today in 2026, right? There is almost nothing that is, I've heard this phrase being used. It's called post-truth. So it's almost nothing that you see anymore online. Can you believe, right? It's, images, video, everything is generated. And so you come to a point now where Tin Man organizations are great as long as everything else around them works as they should. Yeah. But the minute you've got disruptions, the minute you've got challenges, the minute you've got somebody with a need that doesn't correspond to the SOP, you're in trouble.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. With this, for me, depends on the type of service you're consuming as a customer. Because when you're in an aviation situation, for me, knowing that a Tin Man policy has been implemented means that I can depend on this. Like I feel safe, and I think it gives me a sense of safety. In fact, that's probably more important to me than having a good connection with somebody whilst I'm experiencing. I just want to get to my destination safely. And when I see staff doing certain things, which means it comes sometimes at a compromise to the connection I've got with them, I feel I'm good with that, because I know that at least they're doing their job to keep me as a customer safe. So I think there's a fine balance there, isn't there? You've got to prioritize the right things. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really great. Yeah. It's a really great point, Iqbal, because we're not saying it's an or. You're not a Tin Man or something else. You're and if you go back to the Jet 2 example, Jet 2 have got Tin Man through them all the way through from start to finish.
Yeah.
They've got operational excellence all the way through. They do safety. All of those things are there. But it's what that then enables them to do beyond that, because it creates that platform. What I think we were describing with the hotel example and other examples that we might have talked about is that every organization has people that will act on their own intuition and interest to do something in the moment as a one-off, but it's not repeatable. And where the gap happens is where that happens sometimes, but nobody else in the organization is doing it. And actually you haven't even got the basics right. So you don't have permission. So it's all very well, bringing you on board, smiling, giving you free champagne when you're on the plane. But if they can't get you there safely, it's a non-negotiable, right?
There's an element of timing, right? You know how in e-commerce and in retail, we love to say, and in marketing, frankly, we love to say, the right message to the right customer at the right time and so on and so forth. I think Tin Man, when you're at check-in, you're not expecting the flight to be delayed. You're not expecting problems to happen. You're not expecting for the aircraft to have technical issues. You're not expecting, God forbid, to crash. You're not expecting any of the negatives. You're just getting through a transaction. When you're in that particular situation, you could be Tin Man, and that's fine. That's expected. But it's nothing great. It's nothing special. It's not going to help you as a brand, as an airline or as an airport stand out in any way. You're just doing what you need to do, right? Now that's conversely exactly the type of situation where you are, you're open to delight. You're open to surprise. You're open to joy, right? And that's the thing that so many of these Tin Man organizations miss. So at that particular point, every other airline checking in the rows behind you, the rows in front of you, every other airline is efficient. Every other airline has the same KPIs that you have. You got to check in everybody within 2 minutes. The difference is what is the difference that you are doing with your airline at that time when nobody's actually thinking of the negative. So it's normal, business as usual. That's the time when you can hit someone with delight.
Yeah, and that expectation thing's interesting. And we we were chatting earlier on when we were prepping for the podcast, and one of the things we were talking about was how speed and ease used to be a delight moment. Like in the early days of digital transformation, when you got things, when you could go through a shopping basket in 2 clicks instead of 7, when you were able to get delivery within 24 hours, those kind of things wowed you. They became points of difference. Now they're so replicatable by everybody. Everybody has an app. Most people have got digital platforms. Most people can get you delivery pretty quick. Those points of difference and efficiency have now kind of become, I guess, less of a difference point for your products and service, and that's where those human connection things further add this whole moments of truth, or those special moments, or those interactions that drive the loyalty and that future behavior. Because speed is now a commodity. Everybody expects it to be done fast.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic point, Vinay, because I don't believe, and I know there are a number of other behavioral scientists who say the same thing. Speed and efficiency is a temporary differentiator and a moat at best, right? Because the only thing that constrains your competitors or any other company from replicating speed and efficiency and effectiveness is really money, often. And once everybody has it, it's no longer a differentiator. It's no longer something that you can use to stand out, right? I like to say that in aviation, we tend to treat every passenger and every customer, and hotels are the same, and lots of high volume organizations. And to your example at the clinic, anything that is high volume, we tend to treat everybody the same. So we assume everybody wants speed, wants efficiency, wants the 20% that are different. What is important is for that person or the application, as it may be, digital or human, to recognize the situation and the context that you're coming into the servicescape with. If you're coming in requiring extra attention, extra care, a different process, that needs to be recognized and handled. The problem is we don't do that. We just assume everyone's the same, and you want speed and you want efficiency and you want to get through the process.
That's really interesting. I think what I've been seeing in the last few years from a technology standpoint, a lot of organizations have been trying to leverage AI to differentiate, and they've been trying to do that. But I think now it's become a bit of a level playing field. Like you said, everybody will always catch up at some point when your focus is going to be technology. I think where we're seeing kind of AI being utilized to combine both things that you've just mentioned there, Vimal, is from an AI perspective, is being able to surface the right knowledge at the right time with context, and be able to then offer a bit of empathy or really kind of deliver that delightful experience, because actually you've got information at the right time that's been surfaced thanks to AI predominantly. But ultimately it comes down to people, doesn't it? You can have the technology doing all the great work in the background, but it's making sure your people then use that information to deliver that experience.
I think there's not enough, so there's one aspect of it, which is AI. I completely get that. It's important. AI, for example, will tell you that, Vinay is calling up the hotline for the third time in 2 days. Obviously something's up, right? But there's a very important human element, because And I just read this the other day. It says that you should use technology and AI to do the work that humans resent. We resent doing something repetitively. We resent doing something that is tedious, that is emotionally draining. AI and technology should be used to do that. Humans should be doing something that that becomes memorable, that makes you as the employee feel like you're really adding value to someone, right? And if you use that thinking, then what it tells you is that we should be listening, we should be watching, we should be understanding. One of the things I teach in my workshops is actually problem solving and decision making. And one of the decision making models that we use, without getting technical, is that all of us, right, particularly those of us with more than 20 years of experience, we tend to default to the systems that we are used to the experience that we have, to the previous examples that we've handled. And so whenever someone is talking to you, there's a couple of things that happen in our brain straight away. We're not processing. We listen to the 20% and then we make the decisions after that, right? So you immediately want to classify any information that's being given to you about a challenge, a problem, a situation, and you want to put that into a bucket that you can quickly recognize. And once you slot it into a bucket. In other words, you're making an assumption, right? You slot it into a bucket. Oh, I recognize that. And the last time that happened, I did this. This was the rule that applied. And so I'm just going to apply it to you, which is what happens 99% of the time, right? Because you're under pressure to finish that transaction. You're under pressure to just be efficient. And so you listen to 20%, you assume, you go back to the decision that you made the last time, and then you blurt that out to the passenger or to the guest, and the guest just says, "But that's not what I'm telling you. That's not what I'm trying to explain."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like so true. And just so like the culture part and the wraparound that we talked about is really important in that. You know, we said just before it comes down to the people and the people you employ and that kind of thing, and the wraparound. And we talked about Tin Man up until this point, and that develops a certain kind of culture. The other kind of organization that you described, Vimal, was Octopus organizations, which was a different persona. So what's different in an Octopus type organization? What is it? What's different? And what does that allow people to do that you can't do in a Tin Man organization?
Yeah. So first of all, these are not my terms. Yeah. This was from a Harvard Business Review article. They've done a survey and so on, and they came up with the terms Tin Man and Octopus. My contribution to this is a third missing element, which we'll come to later, I guess. But so Tin Man organizations are organized. There's no judgment. It's following compliance rules and so on. Octopus is obviously different, right? So with Octopus organizations now, if you can imagine what an octopus is, it's a brain essentially with legs, right? 8 legs that are connected to the core, and they're going around feeling and adapting to the situation, sometimes even changing the color, and just sort of feeling their way around and understanding what to do. And that's exactly what an Octopus organization is. It believes that the world is fundamentally fluid. Expectations are changing, situations are different. You need to localize, you need to adapt, you need to learn, you need to apply judgment, you need to be creative, these sorts of things, right? So that's in very simple English, that's an Octopus organization, one that doesn't command and control centrally from the core everything. So it sets a central base for operations. I think coming back to your Jet2 example, that's probably the best way, right? It's great operations commanded and controlled at the core, with the satellites having the freedom, the psychological safety, the ability to be creative, to locally adapt and to respond to situations.
And that it reminds me of an analogy I use, or a phrase that I heard actually, rather than an analogy. So Jill Scott, former female England footballer, used a phrase called freedom within frameworks. You know, your point earlier on, Iqbal, about wanting to feel safe and wanting to be able to kind of know that you're going to get there and not have somebody do something that's not that way. Linking back to the psychological safety point that Vimal made earlier on, the psychological safety is giving people that framework to say, this is who we are, this is how we operate. These are the things that you need to work within, because look, no choices without consequence. You know, you don't want people just doing anything and then compromising safety and all of those things. So you've got the framework on the outside.
Yeah.
But I think what I think we're talking about in an Octopus organization is that you then create the environment where people are able to operate with freedom within that operational excellence framework, that they have the autonomy, training, education, whatever it is. Vimal, I think is what you're leading to, right?
And there's a great term for that. It's called distributed judgment, right? Not judgment as in, judge, jury, executioner, but distributed judgment. I mean, there's lots of organizations that assume, because we've got 20,000 employees, we can't afford to let anybody make decisions on their own. So we've got to SOP everything. We've got to put, procedures for everything, and rules and boundaries and so on, right? Whereas an Octopus organization is going to say, listen, this is who we are, this is our vision, this is what we believe in, and we trust, we're working for the customer, for example, right? We want to deliver as much value as possible to customers and so on. And it's now up to you as the employee on the ground facing the customer, wherever you may be, to apply these principles and these values in your interaction with customers. That's distributed judgment, right? So we trust you that in these situations, you have to follow the rules, safety, security, and so on. But in those situations, it's almost like there are no rules. There's sort of guidelines, and there's a vision, and there's a strategy, and there's a belief. But how that is
It gives you
Yeah.
the people the freedom to be able to deliver the service based on what's going on in that moment. And I think that's what happens sometimes, isn't it? Having the guardrails is really important. I was thinking maybe there needs to be a third term, and maybe Vimal, you'll talk about this. This sounds to me like it needs to be like Octo Tin Man or something, where the middle part's the Tin Man with all these different arms and legs. So you've got your process in the middle, which you can't deviate from, but you're giving people on the edge the freedom to be able to to deliver that kind of great experience that you're trying to give your customers. Yeah.
And before we go into that, just building on what you both said, the framework in this, the proxy for that is the culture, right? It's like parenting. We've all got kids. We can't control what our kids do all the time, but we instill them with a set of values and beliefs constantly, daily, through our own actions, to the way we behave, to the things we expose them to the education we give them. And in an organization, it's no different. The framework isn't the written down SOP or the written down structure. The framework is really the environment you've provided, and what you show people what good looks like is how you set standards through behavior, how you facilitate learning and coaching and development of individuals within your organization, and how you show up as a leader constantly is what creates that framework. So I think that's I often see people with posters in their office of culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I chuckle inside sometimes because I'm like, I don't think you quite know what that means. A lot of the time it's misunderstood what that phrase actually means. And, culture is something you've got to be working at all of the time, consistently, constantly, to create that psychological safety moment that somebody can step forward and go, oh, I can see customers doing this. I know I've had training, I've observed this, I feel safe doing this. Let me interject in this conversation and become part of their story, knowing that it's part of who you are in your DNA and it's going to leave that kind of imprint.
Yeah. So, it's funny, but just going back to Jan Carlson, one of the things that he said, which one of my favorite lines from his book is, we've chosen to be 1% better at 100 things than 100% better at one thing. And that speaks on so many levels to me, because a lot of organizations talk about focus. A lot of strategy talks about focus, where to play, how to win. What strategy doesn't tell you is how we're going to do that and how we're going to operationalize that, right? Strategy documents are very bad at that. They sort of centrally command and control the how. But the truth is that you've got to be able to move adaptively, pretty much like an octopus, but much more, right? You've got to be adaptive about how do you allow people to interpret within the guardrails, right? One of my favorite stories, which I recount in most of my workshops, is back in the day when I was in SQ. At some point, I remember our SVP told us, he gathered all of us together and he told us, he said, look, under this new transforming the customer service initiative that we have, from tomorrow onwards, you don't have any limits on service recovery. And prior to that, we had limits, like we could only spend $50 and then the GM could spend so much and VP could spend that much and so on, right? But all the limits, the physical dollar limits were removed. And I tell you, our initial reaction was like, but it's suddenly the rules are taken away and you're left sort of like grasping and wondering, what can't I do? And I tell you what happened the next year. Our service recovery budget actually went down. It didn't go up. Right? Because as a very famous person, Spider-Man's Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's what we did. We started becoming creative, and anything that we did, we justified it from a customer value perspective, right? And as a result, we were very creative. We cared about the company more than we did previously because we had all this power vested in us. Customers were happier. The company spent less money on service recovery. Service was better. Operations was better. All round improvement by removing the rules, right? I thought that's
brilliant. It's a great example because you're putting trust in your people, essentially, aren't you? You're showing that with action, and actually knowing that trust has been given to you is giving you that sense of responsibility. But you just don't. I'm surprised that it doesn't happen more often, because you do see it the other way, where a lot of organizations are trying to control their people in lots of different ways. I mean, we're seeing it at the moment with hybrid working, for example. It's slightly different, but in terms of, outside of the aviation industry, where, post COVID, we're seeing a lot of companies, certainly companies that I'm interacting with, they're trying to get their people to come back in the office and that indicates a lack of trust. It's like, okay, well, we don't trust that you're going to be doing the work away from the office. So I've seen some really good examples. I mean, but what you said there is, we don't see it that often, in all honesty. Yeah.
I think it speaks to the human need of certainty. Certainty equals safety. So if you think about in anything we do, whether you're trading stocks, certainty, you want people, I want to know what people are doing. Control. That apparent feeling of control gives you certainty. Certainty gives you power.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I was saying this to somebody on LinkedIn the other day that, whenever you're asked for the ROI of CX, the only reason somebody's asking you for that is because they want certainty. It's a cover my, behind moment, because it means I've gotten the ROI, I've got some numbers I can put on a piece of paper. Right. Because you notice, you as the CX director or VP or leader will always have to justify what you want to do to your CFO and to your CEO. It's never the other way around, right?
No.
They never have to tell you why they're asking you to do something. You just got to do it, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to always provide some certainty, because they can then report that and then they can hold you accountable. But, it's never the other way around.
No. So you gave us a little teaser earlier on about the third missing piece, or Iqbal set you up beautifully for the third missing piece. And I'm just conscious of the time, and this is a great conversation. The missing piece, Vimal, you've talked about Tin Man, you've talked about Octopus, but there is a missing piece of the jigsaw. What is it, and how would you describe it?
Yeah, so the way I look at it, Vinay and Iqbal, is, if you look at Tin Man and Octopus, they are organizational, operational sort of concepts, right? So this is how, in terms of organizational behavior, are you a Tin Man, are you an Octopus? But I think what we're forgetting is the people. People always make up the organization. And so what I think is we need to move away from only organizational development concepts into people mindset concepts. I call it, so my terminology for it is stewardship. Stewards, right? It's an old English term. Stewards would be, somebody that you hire to look after your property, your life, your family, and the people around you, right? So I bring this idea of stewardship together with Tin Man and Octopus, because I think that's the missing piece, where if we, as individuals, as leaders, as middle managers, as frontline employees, if we take on this idea of being a steward, I think that's going to help you in so many ways to do the work that you do with the people that you're interacting with. So if you're a leader and if you're a steward, you're not only stewarding the business and the assets and so on, but you also, you're also a steward for the people working for you, with you. Mm-hmm. If you're a middle manager, you have stewardship both ways, up and down. If you're a frontline, you've got to be a steward for the people who need you, for the people who are coming to you for the transaction, for your customers, right? For your colleagues, for service providers, third parties who are interacting with you. So I think stewardship is a really, really powerful term. I think of it as a mindset. If you bring that mindset of being a steward, it's going to guide you in so many different ways.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah, I do love that concept around stewardship. I think for me, my very first job I had at Lord's Cricket Ground as a steward. And when I went into that job, actually, interestingly, I thought it would just be, showing people where to sit, that kind of thing. But actually, they spent a lot of time training me on what being a steward means and the responsibility I have to ensure that every customer coming in through the door, making sure that, we help deliver the best possible experience. And they kind of built that ethos into this whole concept around stewardship, right? It's more than just being a frontline person, but actually the impact that you have on people coming in. You're the first person they potentially see, and the impact that has. And it's always resonated with me throughout my career, actually. And you're right, stewardship comes at every level. Not something I've really thought about in that way, but it's I love that.
Yeah, it comes back to the point we made earlier around culture and the role of culture in all of this. And, I've long been a believer that the external experience that somebody has of an organization is a reflection of what's happening on the inside. We talked about it earlier. At an individual level, it's like going to the gym and working on the aesthetic looks that you have on the outside, but not eating well. And then your insides aren't great. You've got to have both. You've got to work on the inside. And often most of the meaningful change or the meaningful improvement comes from working on the inside that then reflects on the outside. And so I think that's the role that culture plays, providing that environment where people can act as in terms of stewardship built on operational excellence, which is the Tin Man Foundation. Those elements kind of layer to give you that exceptional organization. And look, it's a tough thing to do, right? The pressures are there. Quarterly forecasts, meeting shareholder. If you're in a really commercial organization, shareholder value on the outside. If you're a government organization, the pressure from citizens for, what services you want, trying to make them happy. Working within the confines of whichever political party you might be in power at that particular time. If you're, a not-for-profit, you're battling against other forces. So whichever you are, it's a challenging thing to be. But I think what we've heard today is that, absolutely build that operational excellence, but you need to create that environment where people then can step up and have those moments where they can act as the human, as a steward, with that stewardship mindset to be able to deliver those moments that really matter.
Yeah. I think, if it was easy, Vinay, many more organizations would be doing it. So it's not easy. And particularly for aviation. I mean, hotels are a little bit easier, I think. Maybe even rail might be. It's fairly similar to aviation, I think. But, we rely so much on third parties. It's not our airport. You work with government agencies, you work with third parties that supply fuel and provide services and so on and so forth. You've got the weather to contend with. You've got volcanoes that don't comply. Yeah. You've got, political things that happen. You've got there's 100 things that aviation is exposed to. But at the end of the day, it's a mindset. Stewardship is a mindset. If an organization and if leaders do not adopt it, then behavior is not going to change because it all begins up here. So if you begin with the mindset, then you have your Tin Man operations, like you said, as the fundamentals. You've got the Octopus sort of practices that say, okay, this is where we're going to have to comply and not use judgment. And over here is where, you've got the freedom, you've got the creativity to go and adapt. And then ultimately, what should be your driving mindset? It should be the idea of stewardship, right? We will use technology to do the repeatable. We'll use technology to do the work that is frankly boring and resentful to all of us. But it's freeing you, the human, to now look, hear, taste and touch and smell and connect with people on a human level.
Yeah, beautifully put. I mean, I was going to ask you what the takeaway is, but I think you've summed it up wonderfully. That's a great way for us to end the conversation. Vimal, it's been a pleasure having you on. If people want to find out more about you, where can they find you other than LinkedIn, website? What's your website address?
Well, so we have an organization. I run a business called Commercial Excellence Partners. So you can go to commercialexcellencepartners.co. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in Dubai. I have this thing where I try to meet 3 new people a week. I think you remember me saying that to you, Vinay. And I still follow that. I follow that advice for myself. So if you're ever in Dubai, anybody listening to this, just get in touch with me. I'll be very happy to meet you for a coffee. And you never know. That's how friendships develop.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, listen, thanks again. We'll put all your details and links in the description. If you've enjoyed this podcast and if you've enjoyed the messages in here, do let us know. It's always great to hear from people with questions, ideas, challenges. We're really open to that. If you've got any ideas about future guests or topics you'd like us to cover, let us know. And more importantly, if you've loved this, please subscribe to the show, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music, or whichever platform you're on, letting us know that you're following us and making sure that you get the very latest episode when it comes out. So until the next time, for myself, Iqbal and Vimal, goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Okay.
See ya.